The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Pilate said to Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this on your own, or have others told you about me?" Pilate answered, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom does not belong to this world. If my kingdom did belong to this world, my attendants would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not here." So Pilate said to him, "Then you are a king." Jesus answered, "You say I am a king. For this I was born, for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
The persecution of Christians is nothing new. Our Lord himself spoke about it numerous times, that it would take place, that we were to expect it. And yet, it's never easy, especially when it's a systematized persecution. By that I mean not the sporadic persecution of the Jews or of the Christians by the Jews of the early church, which took place, as we know, from the Acts of the Apostles under Saul, who later then converted after encountering Christ. And we have St. Paul. But really, the systematic persecution of Christians commenced in 250 AD under the Emperor Decius. And Decius really wasn't looking to target Christians per se. What he wanted was conformity and uniformity throughout the empire. And Christians were not in uniform practices with the other pagans of the empire. The only ones who were exempt from the edict, in fact, were Jews. This systematic persecution of Christians unfolded over the next 61 years until then an emperor rescinded that edict, and a new edict was issued in Milan in 313, which actually legalized Christianity. First time, 313, legalized Christianity, and therefore in the Roman Empire, Christians had rights and protections under the law. That said, nearly every kingdom and empire throughout all of the last 2,000 years has persecuted Christians at some time or another. Even so, perhaps what you don't know is there have been more persecution of Christians over the past 100 years than the preceding 1,900 years the church combined. And again, always for the same reason, because Christians would not conform to the culture of the kingdom or of the empire. Of course, today we, in our country anyway, enjoy religious freedom, do we not? Same is true of many countries, of many nations today. But then again, the rulers of our time and our age The kingdoms of our time and our age are not as necessarily recognizable as they were over the preceding 1900 years. In fact, the rulers, the kingdoms of our time and our age are institutions more than nations. Yes, of course, the oldest institution still with us, and good in so many ways, is that of government. But again, government of itself often sees itself as a kingdom needing to rule over its people. There are other kingdoms as well. Kingdoms of education, kingdom of entertainment, of medicine, kingdom of law, kingdoms of business and commerce, the kingdom of mainstream media, and perhaps the newest entry is the kingdom of social media. These kingdoms and their rulers use various forms of power to make new rules, to exert supreme sovereignty over their subjects, always under the guise of what is good or what is good for the common welfare of all peoples, but in truth, still seeking the same end of every kingdom, and that is uniformity among its subjects. In fact, they often demand public acquiescence and unwavering loyalty. Any appeal to history and reason are dismissed. Silence and tolerance are no longer being allowed. Even once safe havens such as creed and conscience are now being treated with contempt. Offenders are either blamed or shamed into submission, or they are shunned, sued, convicted, tortured, and executed in a multitude of new ways. The examples are numerous. We hear about them, sadly, too often, but perhaps none more painful than that suffered by, say, the teenager who comes out in defense of the moral teachings of Jesus. His or her trials and persecutions for the faith are only just beginning. Make no mistake about it. For all Christians in our time who will not bow and burn a pinch of incense, so to speak, to these earthly kingdoms and the rulers, will find themselves repeating history. But all is not lost. Jesus told Pilate his kingdom does not belong to this world. Consequently, neither do we who embrace him, our true and only King. We cannot have it both ways. In fact, it is foolish to even try. That said, be wise out in the world. Be prudent out in the world. Be truthful out in the world. But mostly, be ready to give sacrificial witness to the supremacy of Jesus Christ over all, without exception or exemption. The cost is unquestionably high, and it continues to rise daily, not just for ourselves, but also for our children and our children's children, as with every time and place of Christian persecution. How long will it last? I don't know. Every period of Christian persecution seems to have become longer and longer. But we must take the long view, just as Christians did, just as Jesus did. Our ultimate citizenship is life in heaven, not earth. Only those who acknowledge the supremacy of Jesus before others in this life will he acknowledge before God his Father in the life to come. Learn from the saints. Do as they did. They are as numerous as they are both ancient and new. Take yesterday, for example. We celebrated the feast of the Vietnamese martyrs. We're not talking about a few pious souls, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000. What they suffered for their faith is considered to be among the most horrific in the history of Christian martyrdom. Their torturers hacked off limbs joint by joint, tore flesh with red-hot tongs, used drugs to enslave their minds, and branded their faces with the words, "sinister religion." Why? All because they would not conform. All this was done because they bore witness to the supremacy of Jesus as Lord and King of the universe. Their citizenship, however, is secure in heaven, and not just for themselves, but for generations of Vietnamese Catholics to come. When Jesus, our King, returns and lays waste to all the rulers and all the kingdoms of this earth, he will look for one thing only: proof of our faith and loyalty to him before all others. Be not afraid. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to his voice, and the truth is this: there is no king but Jesus. Nevertheless, actions more than words reveal the truth of what we really believe, to whom we are truly loyal, and where our ultimate citizenship resides.